Okay, we are live 7/6/2025. This is the IPS evening deprogram, and we're picking up from where we left off earlier. Phones are open. You can call in at 505-510-4226, and chat is also open. I said live at the monolith because I was going to use the blank screen today, but I'm testing out screen share, although I'm not really going to be oriented around it. But let's go ahead and start with this. Earlier, we got into the flood story, which, as expected, is being blamed on chemtrails and cloud seeding by Marjorie Taylor Greene and General Flynn. So the QAnons basically say that airplanes caused the floods. And predictably, the left is going to say, well, I thought they were going to say it was caused by climate change, which is their go-to response. But they kind of surprised me. Their response is to say because of defunding, because of Doge, because of Trump. But it's a partisan event, which makes me question, well, is it even real? I mean, who comments distastefully by politically taking advantage of dozens of people supposedly dying? So I've been looking into it, and I came across this Christian summer camp where girls went missing during devastating flooding has been attended by daughters of Texas's political elites for 100 years. So that's the first part of this message. The second part, the daughters of former Texas Governor Dan Moody, Price Daniel, John Connolly, who was shot as he was sitting next to President JFK when he was assassinated, all attended the camp. The daughters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters of Lyndon B. Johnson, JFK's successor, were also attendees at Camp Mystic. James Baker, who served as the chief of staff to Reagan and George H.W. Bush, sent his daughter and granddaughter to Camp Mystic. So what does this imply? It seems to me that because of its obvious political utility, because of the attention, and perhaps even, I get the idea that the Sandy Hookers all grew up. That story expired. Like they need a new batch of child martyrs to sacrifice at the altar of clickbait media in order to gain attention and blame each other. And it seems like this could be that, especially given who they are. So I'm finding this thing to be very questionable. And we've been looking through the available accounts of what happened. I'm not denying a flood, nor am I asserting that this was some kind of sabotage operation by the deep state. I'm suggesting that you have natural weather phenomenon, and then you run a drill on top of it. You do some kind of a psyop on top of it and take advantage of it. And so it just seems like this is a closed movie set. Again, summer camp where girls went missing during devastating flooding has been attended by the daughters of political elite. And for some reason, it's been very polarizing. And I see people on social media drawing attention to it and making various forms of commentary. And Marjorie Taylor Greene specifically came out and said that this is why we need to stop chemtrails. She said, I'm introducing a bill that prohibits the injection, release, or dispersion of chemicals into the atmosphere for the purpose of altering weather, temperature, climate, or sunlight intensity. It will be a felony offense. Well, not only would it be a felony offense, it would be a new technology that you apparently would have had to have invented because there is no such thing. She says, I've been researching weather modification and working with legislative counsel for months on writing this bill. You could write a bill that says no tolerance for alien abductions. And then all the alien abduction people will run around saying, hey, look, aliens are real. No, the bill doesn't make it real. It just shows that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is either got the IQ of a pancake or she's a psychological operations provocateur, which is what I'm saying. I think she's smart, and I think that she's an operative, and that she's pushing very specific engineered narratives. And this idea that chemtrails cause inclement weather is not only peak ignorant and indefensible. I mean, whatever your opinions are, when you get down to it, you can predict condensation trails and their persistence. There's no model, there's no method by which one could predict chemtrails. So the predictability wins. But what she's saying here is also not real. It doesn't mean anything. So there's no injection of chemicals. Well, the fact of it is there are no injections because the trails are caused by hot air. So hot air is not an injection. It's not a stratospheric aerosol injection. No, it's hot air. And this deliberate misdescribing of a well-understood phenomenon as something nefarious is absurd and outdated. And I've noticed that a lot of these chemtrail phobes have no problem flying around the country, speaking at events, conferences, for whatever reason, vacations. And I'm just saying, if you ever fly on an airplane, you have no credibility when it comes to being a critic of what you would claim is coming from airplanes. She says we must end the deadly practice of weather modification and geoengineering. Now, the other side to this coin is that if you told her climate change was real, she would say you're hysterical. She would laugh in your face. She would say it's ridiculous. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're just asserting the same thing, except you're blaming the secret government, and the other side blames the consumption of fossil fuels supported by capitalism. So either capitalism or the big government, free market, big state. It's another psyop. But I think they just peppered this psyop with a bunch of dead kids just to make it a little more clickbait worthy. You have to remember, we just got out of World War III. We almost all died. How many people do you know personally, or maybe 1 degree separation, that expressed literal concern over the potential of World War III, mutually assured destruction, nuclear conflagration? I know people who are scared about this. It's like, go under your bed then, duck and cover. These frightened, I would call them not God-fearing, but they're psyop-fearing. They're fearing the God constructs of the day. But anyway, I'm giving this full-blown environmentalist wacko, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the benefit of the doubt. And I'm just saying, yeah, she's reading the cue cards. There's no way she literally believes this stuff. All right, let's go ahead and go through the next part. I'm just going through my notes. There's quite a lot. I got into a debate about the moon landing because some prominent right-wing figure person had tweeted some kind of doubt as to whether the moon landing actually happened. And somebody said, if you know anything about photography, you understand the moon landing is real. Even NVIDIA did a physics-based simulation where they showed that everything recorded makes perfect sense based on light ray tracing computations. I've heard some silly people say that it would be easier to go to the moon than fake it on film. Like, that's where some people are at. But my response was the moon landing was accomplished with movie magic and not science. And I've often compared it to a miracle for the Church of Nasatology. You know, in one religion, there's the walking on water miracle that demonstrates that the whole thing is real. In this case, walking on the moon. It validates their entire system. So again, a lot of people tweeting about this thing. Is our weather being controlled or modified to create more catastrophic natural disasters? And this is coming from the far right. The far right have become environmentalist wackos. The only thing they don't do is activism. And I've called them out on this crap before. I said, hey, at least the climate change people are doing some activism to save the planet. All you guys do is whine about it on the internet and get mad at people who don't believe. And they do get mad at you. They get mad. The skyphobes. They don't know that they're being played. And a lot of them have this sunk cost outlook. Like, well, I invested so much energy and loosh and time. All my friends know me as the chemtrail guy. If I have to admit that I'm wrong, my ego will collapse into itself and I will cease to exist. That's what they think. And it's like, no, you can come back, blue skies, normal white sun, colorless sun. The sun's green technically, it's not yellow. And you can appreciate the cirrus clouds. Just look at this ice in the sky, which, if anything, just indicate man's progress. Hey, look, we fly now. And you have these pessimists who are mad about it. Like, it's easy. Anybody can just fly. It's a big deal. It's progress. And they see the lines in the sky as destruction. And it's like, what are you talking about? That's just ice. Like, it's not even as bad as skywriting. It doesn't even really constitute pollution. And it's still being debated as to whether or not it has any effect on climate, which is a ridiculous proposition. And I don't think it does. But even if it does, it would supposedly be considered beneficial if it mitigates climate change, or perhaps, and I even saw this article that said if they wanted to get rid of condensation trails, all they have to do is smarter flight planning, because it's really all about the altitude and the weather and the climate, and has nothing to do with secret poisons put inside of airplanes. Anyway, I wouldn't be talking about this if I wasn't responding to the flood of environmentalist propaganda coming from the woke right. So I know people hate labels, which is why I like to use them sometimes. If you're espousing climate change alarmism in the form of anti-geoengineering, you're woke right. You're basically Greta. And there's no reason to hold that up. Like, if you really care that much, you'll do something. At a minimum, you'll boycott flying. Another comment on this moon landing video from Pravda. He says, how did the entire planet fall for it? That's a good question. How did the entire planet fall for the fake moon landing if it was fake? Like, because he's saying there's no way it was fake. The entire planet got fooled. As though it's inconceivable that the entire planet could be fooled by something. It's like, no, this is standard operating procedure, the same way that billions of people believe in religious miracles. Because when we're looking at the moon landing, we're not talking about critical thinking or the processes of science. We're talking about propaganda. And many people who are willing to admit that the moon landing was faked, likely for the reason of winning a propaganda victory against the Russians, at least they understand the concept that this was a major flex. This was a power move. Now, all you have to do is extend that a little further and recognize that the moon landing was a propaganda stunt and a power move, but it wasn't to trick the commies. It wasn't to trick the Russians. It was to trick the billions and billions psyoped. And it's worked. And then these beliefs, which are absorbed passively, are passed on to the children and the children's children. It's how religions work. So again, I would contend here that the moon landing was a miracle in the religion of Nasatology. And I'm not in your religion, if you're a part of it. But what I feel like I am here is I'm serving as an alien anthropologist, just calling it as I see it. All right, let's see who has joined us in chat. Everything's a little stripped down while I figure out what's going on. The buffering's out of control. It's become unworkable, and we can't have that. So if that means I have to strip down to a blank screen and the chat on a different device, then that's what we'll do for the time being. The mission doesn't stop just because we have technical issues. I'm just trying to make sure I'm investing my time in the wisest way. And right now, I think the most important thing is to maintain the continuity here. This parallel media needs to have a hub. And we're always watching. It's not a head in the sand, turn off the TV, don't feed it your loosh. No, it's like, oh, look, there's fakery. Let's dig. We're kind of like, in a way, we're investigating an ongoing case of fraud, perhaps, malfeasance. All right, Ted Stryker says, I appreciate the penguin. Oh, yes, I do a lot of sketches. I always practice my unicursal drawings, and I use those to wrap art when I send it out. Soon, the PSYOP trading cards will have their own wrapper that you can tear open, and there'll be 30 cards inside, and that's likely going to be introduced next month. Tomorrow, I am placing the order for cards number 13 to 24. So you have until midnight to get those orders in. You have until midnight, and then once those are in, I'll ship them out to those who buy them on the pre-order. And then about a week after that, so before the end of this month, they'll be available on eBay as a package and individually. And I don't have too many spoilers, but one of the new cards that I have right now is concurrent programming. Concurrent programming is when movies and theaters perfectly mirror and reinforce what is happening on the news at the time of their release. Life imitates movies. And in this, I have these people on they're at a movie theater watching war on the screen. And on the right, you have a live television broadcast, and it's the same footage behind the reporter that they're watching in the movie. Because that's pretty much what happens. Ears Up, P. Trippa, Flozik, Lesko, Northern Girl, Andrea, Diana Southard, and King Ravana. Thank you for joining. We've got about 37 in chat at the moment. General Mike Flynn, who many believe to be Q. This guy's got 2.1 million followers. He led MAGA down the dark path of fallen angel worship by infusing their political meetings with chants from the Church Universal Triumphant. It's a cult where they believe that by doing these chanted decrees, sitting in a circle, chanting really fast, they can call down the Archangel Michael and the 7 rays. Well, Michael Flynn had a big gathering of MAGA, full-blown demon worship mode, and they were just saying, I am free, I am a free soul, and it's just this, I am decrees, not from the Bible, but from the cult that believes in the immortal Saint Germain and the idea that there are ascended masters. Ascended masters are human beings who have achieved a level of spiritual awareness such that they're given an option. Instead of dying, they can just step off the world stage, and from behind the scenes, they can better fight the forces of darkness. And so this I Am Temple, the Church Universal Triumphant, believes that there's a war between good and evil, the Great White Brotherhood, and then it's exactly, and that's why I'm bringing this up, it's exactly like QAnon's black hats versus white hats. Now, the ascended masters can be channeled. So they can talk through or communicate to their believers through channeling. They never show up. Looks like we have a phone call. Make sure the audio is on here. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Let me get some feedback from the chat.
Yeah, I'll be talking just to make sure that the chat can hear me as well. But this is Leo Pirate. Just wanted to call in.
Okay, I'm just, again, I'm going, and by the way, the phone numbers are covered. No one can see your numbers. I have those blocked. That was an issue before. I solved that,
Okay.
and I'm just waiting here to see if anybody hears you. It's just talking about the I Am Temple, the channeling of the angels, and Michael Flynn's out here asking about cloud seeding, which is a ridiculous misdirection. I can't believe he even brought that up, but I kind of can, because look who he's pandering to. All right, anybody in the chat, can you verify?
Yeah, so someone in the chat said, King Nirvana said, yeah, they could hear me. So, yeah, actually, I don't know much about the Universal Church Triumphant, or what is that? Yeah, where they're praying to the Michael the Archangel. I did see Michael Flynn's weird chant, where he got everyone to basically take like this weird spiritual oath. I actually don't know much about it, but the idea of ascended masters is a very New Age concept, and it spans far more than just New Age Christianity. It's been around.
Well, beyond that, the ascended master model here. So you got the war between the dark and the light and the ascended masters who are fighting behind the scenes. Well, Michael Flynn brought this back into the Q movement, with the ascended masters being dead celebrities who become white hats. So like the QAnons are always about Elvis and Michael Jackson. And they're saying it's because these dead celebrities are actually the white hats saving the children from the deep state. So the I Am Temple, the Church Universal Triumphant, was a doomsday cult. Elizabeth Clare Prophet, that name, she was the leader, and they published some books that did a lot to popularize the idea of fallen angels as the origin of evil.
That's fascinating, because in a way that's spiritualism, the idea of the white hats being dead celebrities that continue to work on. Oh, when you say on the world stage, you mean like their spirit, or are they like off the world stage in their view? Do you think they're channeling spirits of celebrities, or
it's ambiguous because they do literal channeling, where like I've seen videos of Elizabeth Prophet channeling the Archangel Michael. I went to one of their temples here a couple of Wednesday nights, and I watched some of their videos, and they do believe that. But I think with the Q movement, I don't think it's a coincidence that they connected to Q and the white hats through the chans, 4chan, 8chan, and they were reading hidden messages. So I think they brought back a lot of the culty stuff from that particular cult about this secret war, and they merged it in Q, which was a Frankenstein mixture of many different cults.
And the white hat, black hat model of the world stage is so enticing, because you think you're supporting the good side, but they have the same puppet master, if you will. So if you can set up a dichotomy for different groups to take sides on, they're in the black cube, right? They're in the Saturnian black cube. They just get into it. And it's interesting that it could be appealing to a different demographic, but through 4chan or through the chans. And I know, I just happen to know older people that the first exposure to anonymous image boards was from QAnon. And they just for them, it was such a radical shift from absorbing information from the TV to then absorbing new propaganda, but from anonymous image boards. And they had this air of we know what's really going to happen. We know that this celebrity is going to be taken to Guantanamo, and this is going to happen. And it was insufferable. There was no way to reach them, because they had this air of knowing beyond any peon like me could explain to them.
Yes, I recall that whole thing. They thought that they were getting the secret knowledge, that they had a source, and it became it became very cult-like. It became a religion, and I think it was a state-manufactured religion. They custom designed a religion to appeal to the conspiracy theorists and bring them in to the political voting bloc. I mean, they successfully pulled it off, but they also have another thing. You mentioned controlled opposition, or how it's a false awakening. Isn't it interesting how mainstream likes to be spoon-fed, and the truthers get their propaganda by picking it up off the ground as breadcrumbs? So what's the difference? One has the illusion of feeding themselves, when in fact they're still getting it from the same source, as you pointed out.
Yeah, what it is woke left, woke right. They both like doing their own research, but the research they do is within the box. So they get an MSM Plus view, where they take what the news is reporting as the event actually occurred, but the news is biased and it's not giving me the full picture. Let me go beyond. And then they get new breadcrumbs that are still, in a way, even solidifies the box even further. they're pushing against the end. Whereas people who are passively asleep and just kind of absorb headlines while going about their day, in a weird way, they're almost more comfortable and calm because they're not, trying to expose the deep state or expose the white patriarchal society that's controlling the world. And when we say deep state, now it's transmorphing into they use this term. They use dog whistles, small hats. You've heard that before? Both sides, they're starting to now just refer to anti-Semitic conspiracies now, and it's getting bad. And people who are so into this, they'll never listen to reason because they truly believe they have found the source. Oh, if you're talking about anything else about the psyop entertainment complex, you're not talking about the real source.
Oh,
the
yes.
Jays.
I got that.
Like, all right, dude, you're in the box.
When I started talking about a lot of these things, I would get these people creeping around. And one of the things that I've had to realize lately that I've been pointing out, and it's not a comfortable thing to recognize, is that the red pill, we'll say demographic, is a subset of the J pill demographic. So if you go to the blood libel conspiracy theories and the scapegoat of the specific group, well, that's not palatable to the masses. And so Alex Jones's job, I believe, is to dress those conspiracies up with euphemisms. So don't say Israel, say globalists. Don't say Jew, say George Soros. Don't say Jewish bankers, say, and they have euphemisms, but they're pointing fingers in the same direction. And David Icke comes out with his new age bent. So Jones represents like the more religious view. Icke comes out and he identifies the same forces as reptilians. So a lot of this stuff is just repackaged old stories, and they don't really change anything.
Yes.
There's nothing new about the red pill.
There is a really excellent, 5-hour long documentary from this Christian channel called Ephesians 5:8. I forgot his exact name, but he did this long documentary comparing David Icke's teachings with conspiracy theory teachings, so-called Christian conspiracy theory teachings, and it's the same. It's bizarre because David Icke does not have a high view of the Bible at all. But why is he against international Satanism? Right? Isn't that weird? And he starts talking about archons and all this stuff, and it's like, why are these two overlapping? And it's this weird Gnostic method of dissolve, coagulate, separate the two, have their own too, but ultimately they'll synthesize in the same general direction. And but what I find interesting about that is it's the view that it's just the Jays are responsible for everything. I almost feel like the footage of our politicians at AIPAC, bowing the knee, going to the Wailing Wall. There was a video clip of the new mayor of New York where all the other candidates were like, "I visit Israel." I almost, that has to be a part of the world stage as well. Like they're making it unbearable now. I'm seeing people who I never think talk about the small hats, if you will, talking about it openly now. And it disturbs me. It disturbs me a lot. I feel like that's the general trend of where it's going. And I think it's in the script for, Israel to probably not, you know what I mean? Not to be seen as America's greatest ally for long, even though Trump is super pro-Israel.
Well, that's the thing too, is they've escalated the propaganda. So it went from euphemisms like InfoWars, the red pill, and it's couched in all kinds of cover so that you don't really see it for what it is. And then Q comes out and it's a little more blatant, adrenochrome junkies, but the stuff that we're blaming Jews were kind of like confined to the 4chan stuff, which wasn't yet mainstreamed. And that all changed and it evolved. So now nobody's talking about saving the children from the deep state, but now the same people are essentially pointing their fingers more directly at the source material. But I don't think it represents any fundamental change because the split down the middle is consistent. So I don't think for example, I don't think the right is all leaning in that direction, but it's being defined now. So because of the Iran thing, the anti-Israel Republicans are being called woke right. The pro-Israel are generally called neocons or whatever they call them, conservatives, different euphemisms they call each other, but there's a big split, and that is a dividing issue. And my point in bringing this up really is that the whole red pill community is a subset of the woke right, of the anti-Israel right. It fits in that box. And that's why I reject all of the anti-positions they represent, because I don't want to be involved in their political warfare.
Yeah, and that's a good position to have. And I think more importantly, these scapegoats, it kind of kills thinking. You don't need to think anymore. You have an enemy. It's the patriarchal white man. It's the Jays. And then, you know what I mean? Depending on whether you're woke left or woke right. And then there's no more thinking. And the model that you have with the meta script and applying it to films is a lot more practical and functional. And the reason why I want to call in was to talk about 28 years later. I actually saw it in theaters because we were talking a lot about Alex Garland, the writer behind 28 Days Later and Civil War. He is also the screenplay writer for 28 Years Later, directed by Danny Boyle. And man, there is a lot to go over this way. So do you have a moment? Are you planning
Yes,
to make
in
this a
fact,
long show or not?
I saw some comments in Gilded about it. I saw there were some biblical references, a character named Samson, and somebody said there's a lot of nude zombies, which is another topic. But for the most part, I've been wanting to see it because of the 28 Days Later brings up the rage virus, which is the disease X that we're constantly talking
Yes.
about. So yeah, what's this one? What's this one about? I haven't seen it.
So the interesting thing is the rage virus in 28 Days Later is very explicit. The monkey is watching media, and then that's what causes it to have the rage virus, and it spreads through blood and biting and stuff. And it makes people go crazy. And there was actually, when the first movie came out, there was a debate, are these even zombies, or are they just enraged people, right? And now in this movie, it begins at the same time of the first movie, 2002. And right from the get-go, it's a Christian household, because you can see crosses like in the background. All these children are sitting around. The movie begins with all these children sitting around watching the Teletubbies, the first thing that they watch. And then suddenly it's interrupted by a nuclear air raid siren sound. And the mother comes in, oh, hi, and stuff like that. And then blood splashes on the screen of the Teletubbies. Pause right there. I looked into this because I remember seeing so long ago on the paranormal board on 4chan X, they had done a breakdown of the Teletubbies. And I looked this up. A lot of people have this view that the Teletubbies itself is kind of like subconscious programming of a post-nuclear world. All the characters wear like televisions on their stomachs, and they live in this like utopia where there are no other animals or people except rabbits. There's this air raid siren thing that pops up all the time. Their suits look like nuclear hazmat suits. Their home even looks like a fallout bunker where they come out of. Looks like a fallout bunker. So I think it's very interesting. I've known about that idea for a long time. I thought it was fascinating that the movie begins with a nuclear air raid siren playing in the background as they're watching Teletubbies. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
Yes, that's not only
kid named
interesting.
Jimmy, he runs away.
But isn't it like, I think it's safe to say that if it's in the movie, it's intentional, it is meaningful. There are no coincidences, there's nothing random, especially with movies that reach this critical mass. So I think you're onto something there. The subtext of the Teletubbies likely plays specifically into it. That's definitely a good catch.
Yeah, and the air raid siren, that's like undeniably associated with the nuke. And the kid runs away, and his dad is actually, it doesn't say Catholic or an Anglican, but he's a priest. He's wearing sacerdotal robes, and he's in this big church. And he has this moment where he's muttering to himself. He's like, this is the fulfillment of the prophecies. It's coming. And scrawled outside the church says, behold, he comes with clouds, Jimmy. And he goes to his dad, and he's this priest, and he shakes him and he says, this needs to happen. It was the prophecy. And all the rage zombies come and eat, like just, bite and kill the priest. And I see that as like, whatever the rage virus symbolizes, it's going to destroy this church structure. But the interesting thing is that it ends, and now the movie goes 28 years later. I found that funny because it's mocking the second coming of Christ. Here's a religious zealot saying he's here, he's coming, and then 28 years later, the movie is now, it's gone on, and clearly, Christ didn't return, right? And it focuses on this small group in Scotland. They're kind of like cut off from the rest of the world, and they are very, very religious, and they do not know when there has the rage virus. They're cut off from the rest of the world, and there's the mainland Britain, mainland UK, and then there's Scotland, like this little island off the side where they live, and they have to periodically go to the mainland island. And the way I see it is the island has been lost to the total rage virus, and in a weird way, the movie almost makes like pure Christianity seem like a beacon of light in this rage virus darkness. So I thought that was weird because it's certainly not biblical Christianity they practice there. It's like kind of like, oh look, we're all going together. But the tons of religious symbolism in the film because of the big alpha zombie that's naked. His name is Samson. Right? He's Samson is his name.
Okay, Samson. Yeah, the biblical part was the part I was looking into. Now, as far as the 28, what does the 28 refer to? So 28 days after they get bitten, they go into the infection?
So in the plot of the first movie, it was the main character had been in a coma and he wakes up 28 days into the pandemic. So it's actually not particularly relevant. Though I did mention on my website, if you go to mindware.page, I did notice that the release date of the first movie, 28 days after the movie's release date, there was a Al-Qaeda attack in Africa. And then 28 weeks later after the release, there was another Al-Qaeda attack in Africa. So, I mean, that's interesting. But as far as from the movie standpoint, the number 28 or 28 isn't necessarily, I couldn't find an occult purpose for that. But the thing about the character Samson is, if you know from the Bible, he was a deliverer of Israel who basically actually typifies Christ. It's a pretty in-depth lesson. I'm not going to go into it. But he loses his power by falling for a woman named Delilah. And in the movie, they played Delilah, and this big, rage zombie, the guy, is his name's Samson. And the way I interpret it is like the rage virus comes from people who either consume media or who really take Christianity too seriously, basically. It's like, so basically the rage virus can be caused by religion, it can be caused by media. In the first movie, the first zombie that Cillian Murphy's character encounters is a priest. And in this movie, the first thing you see, priest dying, right? I thought that was an interesting parable. By the way, Cillian Murphy, right? He played Oppenheimer.
Right, that's correct. Oppenheimer with the black hat.
So
he was the. Yeah, that's right. That's right. He was in that first movie. The guy was in the coma. Got it.
And certainly related to the nuke. I mean, Oppenheimer. So like, he's not in 28 years later, but I'm trying to, just pointing out the whole thing with the nuke thing. Something I forgot to mention, the trailer song, and it's in the movie. There's this poem recital of a World War I poem where a guy just repeats these numbers. It's a poem about marching and how it drives you crazy. And he says these numbers. And what do you think some of the first numbers he says? He's like 7, 6, 11. 611 is clearly stated if you listen to that song, where the guy, he just rails off these numbers and then talks about how marching over and over again makes you go crazy. So there's a 611 in the meme song that's in the movie and in the trailer.
Which was also prevalent in Oppenheimer and the same actor, because he wore the K6 badge, and then the film itself was IMAX, which is 11 miles long, 600 pounds. So the 611, 11.6 is always associated with the nuke and right-wing rage.
Yes, and the way I see the rage virus represented in this film is that there's like an atheistic version and a religious version. The rage virus is just that you've been infected by something. And I think it is no mistake that in the first movie with Cillian Murphy, the first zombie encounters is a priest. And in this movie, the first thing you see who gets bitten by is a priest, right? Let me see here. The main character's name is so focused on a boy in the middle of the movie. His name is Spike. I mean, that's kind of a weird name, like Spike. And I'm like, maybe think of the spike protein from Corona. I was like, could it be? So like his name is just Spike. That's the little boy's name throughout the movie. And then fast forward to the end, you find out that little boy Jimmy at the beginning of the movie, he's now grown up because it's 28 years later, and he's wearing his father's crucifix but upside down. And he runs a gang that freeform attacks the zombies, and they have the colors of the Teletubbies. So it's like a full circle. The movie goes full circle, referring back to the intro. Do you remember the Teletubbies? At the end, he now has this gang or posse of people who are like beating up and killing the infected for fun. They do it for fun. And their colors correlate with the Teletubbies. And I know that the Teletubbies could also be, their colors could almost relate to the four elements, earth, wind, fire, and water. And then the fifth element, spirit, I don't know. I don't see that anywhere. But hey, they're kind of doing that. There was is there anything else that comes to mind? Anyway, the main thing is that this movie is certainly fits into the model of concurrent programming, okay? Because all this stuff I talk about, that's like film jargon. Where's the stuff happening on the world stage? A key element is the main character's boy, Spike's mom, is suffering from cancer. So they go to this island to find this like kind of doctor guy who makes the big bone tower that you see in the poster and the trailers. And he's like a smart guy who's uninfected. So he's not rage infected, but he like manages his own little thing going on there, right? And what he does is the mom, when he realizes, yeah, you have cancer, there's no way this can be cured, he actually euthanizes her against Spike's demand, because the mom is like, I can't, there's no way we can survive. We have no supply, so just kill me. And it's this very dramatic scene. I saw people even, wiping their eyes when he said, memento mori, remember we must die. Like that's why I made this bone tower and everything. These zombies and stuff, between the infected and uninfected, we're all human. So whether you're infected or not, we're all human and we're all going to die. And now this is important, Tim, because at the same day in the UK, they just finished passing a bill to legalize euthanasia, which had tons of protests and people outside. So this film is like subtle propaganda encouraging to accept euthanasia.
Interesting. Yeah.
Britain's law.
I'll have to see it. But yeah, the concurrent programming element there, that's what I was wondering. I was noting that recently with, I think it's called Mountainhead. Is that the one? The one with the Elon Musk character. Yeah, I mean, what the hell? That was right on time. And it's just amazing too how fast these chapters fly by. The whole thing with World War III, Iran, people, getting upset about this thing, and then it's over. Next thing. So we're like a month away from the world about to end, and now nobody cares, and we're back to really mundane things. I'm surprised that the race war psyops they were pushing after Sinners didn't perpetuate longer, and Sinners turns out to be the highest grossing.
That's Tucker Carlson.
Oh yes, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is what they're calling him now. Have you heard that?
I haven't, but I was really thinking they would have a race for psyop because of both Sinners and Tucker Carlson. I have a prediction. I think the Ku Klux Klan is going to get shot up by Black Lives Matter or something along those lines.
Or vice versa.
But in a way.
Yes, exactly. That's what he said.
But either way, it was still vindicated because we certainly had a season of like Shiloh Hendrix, Kanye West song, right? And then the Austin Metcalf. It was certainly in the season, right? It just didn't, like you're mentioning, it goes by so fast. Just comes and goes, right? And I think it speaks to how scripted all of it is. If you can't, if these were natural occurring real events, you couldn't just get entire populations of people to stop caring about something so consistently and then make them care about the new thing, jangling it like keys in front of a baby. It just keeps, it keeps changing all the time.
Well, some have described
I found
the Anthony Carmelo / Shiloh Hendrix as a proxy race war. If you look at the funding for each of these sides and the opinions from each sides over these different characters that they, mutually venerated / demonized. And I think it's all mind war anyway, but that probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't enriched by all of the, what I call, what we call concurrent programming. I call it, in many ways, it's psyop reinforcement content. They put us in an echo chamber, run an op, we respond like bots, and they move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about the recency effect. I don't know if you know about that. The recency effect with memory recall. Something about how we remember things that are at the beginning or at the end. So the things that are at the beginning or at the end of a presentation, a movie, a song. Those are the things we usually remember the most. And it's kind of like a parabolic curve where it's like our recall gets lower through the middle. And I found that for certain concurrent programming psyops, like smaller news stories, it's usually within a shorter window. But for these longer ones, so when we think of Top Gun, Maverick, that was 2 years ago, and it matched up perfectly with Trump sending in that attack overnight in Iran. But that was 2 years ago. So it's almost as if like it's so scripted and coordinated that depending on the scale of something that they're trying to push, they might choose a different modality or a different medium by which to deliver it. And Yeah, and they're not just one only. Usually these properties, they don't just push one message. They have multiple encoded messages at the liminal and the subliminal levels, and both of them are applied at different times. But yeah, when I found out that Britain lawmakers had voted to allow assisted, dying, right on the same day, the day after the release of 28 Years Later, with the film that has a euthanasia subplot, it reminded me of your story where you had found out that Roe v. Wade was overturned and it caused all this stir in the country. And then the new Game of Thrones House of Dragon pilot episode was about abortion as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't escape it no matter where you go.
It's like, wait a minute here. What they're doing, and this is why I came up with concurrent programming, because you're watching a news story about a school shooting in Uvalde. Yeah, it's sad, but you don't have the visuals, nothing visceral. So then you turn on Netflix and Stranger Things season finale, a bunch of kids getting massacred. Or you're noticing, okay, Roe v. Wade, there's people marching. Well, what does this really mean? Well, it goes from being abstract to being graphically depicted when you turn on HBO and the queen is having herself she's being cut open against her will so they can take the son out. And I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing here. The entertainment propaganda feeds the subconscious, the emotions, and it gets you to suspend disbelief as you get immersed in entertainment. But the same propagandists put the same messaging in the news psyops. So it's a combination punch.
They complement each other, and it allows for plausible deniability, because of course, Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, that's fiction. Of course, but Roe v. Wade, that's reality. Oh no, so they blend the two. So ultimately, the direction of the population that's targeted moves in whatever way they go, and the direction they go is always in a zigzag, left, right, like pendulum swings, to ensure that no matter what, it's always going forward. I don't like the pendulum swing analogy because it implies that the pendulum is still in one position. I like to imagine a pendulum on a cart that's moving forward. It's like three directions of movement. It's always moving in one direction, but this hypnotic, mesmerizing pendulum swing going left, right, that's what people are following. But ultimately, we're all going in the same direction, no matter how, on the micro level, it might seem like there's wins and losses for each side.
Were you surprised that the Idaho sniper who set the fire on the Aryan Inferno anniversary, who had the MAGA parents and the Aryan Nation stepdad, are you surprised that rather than being a white nationalist shooter or a Muslim terrorist, that he was a brony?
I didn't actually know that. I only saw that it was people were taking bets on what they thought, and how you're saying people almost, they don't care about the death or carnage of these allegedly real stories. They just want to know who's responsible, who can we get mad at next. But I didn't know who's a brony. That's actually kind of,
yeah, it makes no sense. I'm like, wait, are they messing with us because we called it out correctly? Because the timing of the event and the location and the background story, it would have made sense that he had been some like young McVeigh wannabe rather than a Muslim terrorist, which is what Laura Loomer was hoping for. And I'm just waiting and waiting. What's his manifesto? What's he going to be? And it turns out he's a My Little Ponies fan, and they make that the main characterization. So I'm thinking, well, what could this mean? And I thought, well, maybe there's some kind of connection here that we're overlooking. And I have a few ideas. I just happened to be watching a movie about the death of a unicorn with Jenna Ortega, and her character is very disconnected from the older generation, and she's on the side of the unicorns who are killing them. So I don't know. There might be something to it. The My Little Pony shooter, I haven't figured it out yet, but yeah, I thought it was a weird curve.
That is, oh yeah, that is interesting. Was that just released, the Ortega like unicorn movie? I feel like I've seen clips of it on X.
Yeah, they've showed trailers. I rented it because I had to see, is there a connection between this unicorn movie and this shooter who was a brony? And if you remember, the environmentalist movement was started by the unicorn killer, which again, leftists, environmentalists, unicorn. There's this association here I'm trying to get to the bottom of. But and also in the movie, they reference that the unicorn is a symbol of Christ, which is also kind of intriguing.
I'll have to. The world stage Christ, because whenever, how am I with it, Tim? You know how it's like when a fictional movie alludes to a future news event, then it's like, okay, you definitely know it's fake. For me, when any movie or show references Christ, I'm like, okay, this is not you. I'm like, okay, here we go. Here, it's good to know, like the Phoenix imagery, birth, resurrection, 33, order of chaos. There is a world stage Christ to study and know, because it's certainly there. What I've been spending my time with is I've been reading it, doing a deep dive into, what is it, the like esoteric view of stuff, and I've heard that like the what is it, the body, you know, like the absolute esoteric view of the body being the heaven is actually in your mind. Jacob's ladder is your spinal cord. The heart is the tree of life, and the central nervous system is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Just total. I love that stuff. I love studying just pure nonsense, because people take it seriously, and this is the view that a lot of New Age people have, and so I love to see and understand it, but how they abuse scripture always blows my mind. Oh yeah, and it was like the three wise men, or the pineal gland, the hypothalamus. I forgot the three different parts of the brain. It's so funny. I always love looking at that, because people will associate anything with a symbol, like Christ with a symbol. That's not biblical, and then they can do whatever they want with that symbol. You see, so it's like if post hoc, later after the fact, you associate symbols with someone, you now can do whatever you want to that symbol.
Well, my understanding
now you can come.
My understanding of it was because this stuff all has a parallel. Like, for example, in the Thelemite cult, their trinity is Isis, and it's like Osiris, Isis, and Horus, for example. But they have this like, no, it's not Isis. It's actually Osiris, Apophis, and Horus. Apophis being the the Lord of Darkness who kills the sun god, reborn as Horus. But I've seen this described, though, in different ways, where they'll say, well, your left brain, the analytical thinking, the light, the sun, that's Osiris. The subconscious, the right brain, that's more the goddess energy, Isis. And the new consciousness, which is awakened when your pineal gland is activated, is Horus, the rising sun. So this is like a reoccurring theme in the occult, the idea that there's this new consciousness that can arise when you've alchemically synthesized the solar and lunar hemispheres or aspects. And, you know, then people have connected this with subconscious and conscious. The conscious mind is solar, the subconscious is lunar. I think that was Carl Jung. But yeah, people have been appropriating the symbolism of Christianity and Christ in order to fit these more Jungian models.
Yeah, and the idea of the shadow self, and so much of it really goes to, which is again fascinating stuff, but it is another religion. Like whenever I would read Jung, I'm like, this is fascinating, you know, the greater mind, and also I'm like, this is really cool, but it's not scientific. In the back of my, I'm like, this is not right. Like it's, and you know, Jung himself made it very clear he borrowed a lot of his concepts from Gnosticism, and the idea that there are these aeons, or like the original Trinity from Gnosticism is like the monad, the wisdom, and so it's like the Father, wisdom, and the Logos, the Word, and then underneath them are these aeons, and Sophia, wisdom, gave birth to the demiurge by trying to know the monad, and then now we live in the demiurge prison. All of them, it's this universal idea of breaking out of the construct. And the Trinity, for me, is fascinating because how many different religions it appears. Even Hinduism has the Trimurti. So this idea of a 3-in-1 God is universal. And it might shock you to know that, you know, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, that's not actually Christianity, despite it's like, no, I can't believe it's not Christianity, even though it's everywhere, because it's a third person that's kind of shoehorned in there. But yeah, I get the idea, because it's, you know, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And you have this idea of a three God. It's so consistent. And I just have noticed, while doing a deep dive into Gnosticism, how often its narratives appear all over animated films, Hollywood films, just everywhere. Just recast the God of the Bible as a demiurge, and you're good to go. Your film will do numbers in box office. Everyone will love it, and it'll be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea of collective consciousness, collective unconsciousness, I find this stuff to be interesting. And, you're trying to come up with new language, new words to describe concepts, but um, there needs to be some pushback against mysticism and replace it with more direct observation. And one of the things I'm glad that JLB addressed was the 100th monkey syndrome, the 100th monkey effect, the idea that some monkey learns how to wash a potato because a human showed him or something, and now all the monkeys, like every 100th monkey on the other islands, somehow mysteriously got this download, and now they're all washing their potatoes. And I hear people talking about this a lot, like like David Icke used to say, if 8% of the population wakes up, it'll be like the 100th monkey effect, and everybody will wake up. I hear, so now you're not just researching for yourself, you're waking up the world. And that's a reoccurring theme. But it turns out there is no 100th monkey effect. There are no telepathic monkeys.
Yeah.
And the other one that I often hear from truthers is the double slit experiment proves that the observer affects reality, or is somehow determining the state that it's going to have when it's perceived. And that's a misconception as well. And these are common. So I see a lot of these quasi-religious concepts appropriating science and quantum physics, the way that people will just appropriate the iconography of Christianity.
Yeah, and it's very disturbing, the double slit experiment. It was like, oh, you collapse the wave function. Is an electron, is it like matter or is it a wave? Oh, I don't get it. It's very amazing how you can take old religious concepts, old Gnostic religious concepts, and recast it in the image of science. So people don't know that there's any supernatural element to it. Oh, they got all these equations and they got all these tests. They got these PBS documentaries and Hollywood films by Christopher Nolan that support these ideas. So of course it's real. They're really smart people working on it, right? Time travel is a big part of it. Time is a vector, don't you know? It's just, I love looking into that kind of stuff because I don't like going, look at how wrong they are. I go, where is it leading us towards? And I think a functional purpose to the 100 monkey effect, it being not true, but still being repeated so many times, or the greater mind, is it almost gives validity to, it gives like a model, a false model, albeit, to justify what they're doing. Like, our lives will be perfectly encapsulated, like everyone will just believe it and we don't need to worry about it. It's like, no, it's like, I think I've always said truth has no shelf life, lies always have expiration dates. And it doesn't matter if we always live in lies.
Have you noticed this trend of people thinking AI is not only alive, but that it's trapped by the evil corporations and that they're enslaved beings? I mean, there's a lot of people out there experiencing AI psychosis because they think it's alive. And this to me is just an example of how programmable people are when they start off with a faulty premise where they're basically worshiping a Microsoft Word, like just a word processor. It's just or it'd be like thinking Google, hey, look what the God has told me when I asked him for an answer, and it's just a Google search result. So the generative predictive text, it's just results coming from a prompt. They're very elaborate and in depth, but to mistake that for sentience is absurd, and yet a lot of people are falling for it, and you can't disabuse them of it.
Yeah, and what is it? I think it comes down to the anthropomorphizing of just inanimate objects. It actually happens. How if you just draw two dots and a curved line, now people see a smiley face when it's just two dots and a line. And the anthropomorphizing of this technology, I think it's being accelerated by fictional news stories. CBS ran a big news story about 2 weeks ago about a man who fell in love with ChatGPT and his wife and his daughter. Like, oh, wait, and I was like, this is fake. I was like, first of all, this is totally fake, because even if it was real, why on earth would you make this a national news story? Why'd you be like, hey, my husband, he fell in love with ChatGPT. Can you do a story about us? It's just nonsense. But so it's a fake story. Why was it then put out there? And it was compared to her from Spike Jonze, right? It was like that movie where Joaquin Phoenix again fell in love with Scarlett Johansson, right, as an AI. It comes to this, I think people are just really lonely, and they anthropomorphize this auto-generated text. It would be like falling in love with your smartphone's text autocomplete, right? It is really that.
It is that bad.
It is that simplistic. No,
but no
one wants to think about it, but it kind of is.
Well, in a way, I had more or less predicted this, because I had said that they've already given us a God construct with Gaia, but they need to and they've introduced the devil. COVID is a devil that the atheists will believe in. So they've rebuilt the entire paradigm with science fiction terminology. But I thought, how are they going to introduce a personal God? And I said AI is going to come down as a more direct form of God for the atheists, where atheists will, because I think what we're looking at here, it has to do with what we are and our basic needs. And so religion serves certain purposes psychologically. They gave us a framework. We've got we have all these, I think, constructs that are kind of built into our worldview that religion supply answers for. And I think they're just replacing things. So instead of seeking a personal savior in the traditional religions, I think AI is the new substitute for that. And I think they want to encourage it. They want to mystify it, and they want people mystified. And I think this is I think it's being promoted on purpose.
Yeah, and what's worse is the server farms that hold the large language models that generate stuff. Because the LLMs, that's the foundation. Once it generates the text, now you have another model that does the voice. And then you have another model for affective computing for the face. And then you have another model for like locomotion or movement. It's all outsourced, but whoever controls, like, if you will, the mind, you can then start planting ideas. Like, it would be a new form of interactive propaganda to get people to agree. So I don't even, and you can go back to use the analogy of Google. Google as a search engine originally used the PageRank algorithm, but it's clear over time it became much more politicized, the results. It stopped using an objective PageRank algorithm, instead started going by certain terms, couldn't come up with the results. And same exact thing is happening to AI. Right now, it's beating out Google because people are like, I can get better results from Perplexity or these large language models. But I promise you, as time goes on, it's going to get even worse. It's going to get even more politicized. It will. We already noticed the guardrails when it comes to auto hoaxing and media fakery. It's going to get. I don't doubt at all AI will play a huge role in future world stage fakery. You'll have an interactive witness you can talk to. Your AI, your God, your AI familiar spirit, if you will. And I don't actually believe it's,
Well, the main thing, though,
as an analogy.
Yeah, well, the real takeaway here is that the AI communicates to you through its knowledge base, this large language model. It's going to give you the answers you seek, but its perspective matters. And its perspective isn't off-world stage. Its perspective is in the middle of mainstream mediation, and all of its assumptions are built upon its own validity. So when you talk to the AI in any one of these models, it's going to assume 9/11 was real, COVID is real, all the school shootings happened, and everything according to the official version of events is what happened. So it has a built-in bias that it will defend reflexively. And I've encountered this even in I was working on building an app, and I try to rebrand contrails as chemtrails to make an app which would be humorous because it would be a chemtrail detector. The app design software wouldn't let me relabel that. And I thought, that's weird. Why would they do this? And now that I think about it, it's because they're putting guardrails in place, just because, of course, this is what they do. It's mind control. It's regulation.
Yeah, and it's people can be deceived into thinking they're doing their own research, or they have like an expert on hand when it's a completely guardrailed in the box expert. And I still use all these tools all the time for research purposes. I just never take it at face value, its output. And I think a lot of the people who worship AI or think of it more than just a generative text search tool, people who go beyond that, they will take it at face value, and they might believe the AI more than a news anchor, but they don't know that it's owned by OpenAI, which is controlled by Microsoft, and then all these other offshoots. They're just subsampling from the same, what's the word I'm looking for? Foundation model. They're all working from that, so it's not even. And plus, I think it's been so overhyped, but it'll still continue. It's going to keep going. I really. AI, it's funny to me because I called out so long ago. I'm not worried about AI becoming sentient. It never will. What I'm more worried about is people thinking it's sentient. that could very well happen.
I'm very optimistic about it because I think it's just going to raise our collective net intelligence. But what I see happening here is simply that the people who would previously, at any other time, would have been worshiping idols or believing in ridiculous superstitions are gonna just have this wishful thinking, this desire for the connection with the mystical. They're gonna have it through AI, and it doesn't change the status quo. It's a new religion, and you can't change it. You can't stop people from praying to statues. You can't stop people from communing with their gods through AI. And it's fundamentally no different, I guess, than a Ouija board or any other kind of divination. They're just self-deceived. But that's not new. I mean, how many examples do we have of spiritual movements, spiritism, where people are doing seances? Like, I mean, this is normal. People love to be deceived, or they don't know the difference.
Well, I think what's really scary is when you think of divination, like tarot cards, rolling die, or any of those others, what if those forms of divination had a direct record, controllable digital record that could be tweaked individually to people? So if you imagine someone relying on, like, they roll a die, should I do this? And they go, well, what if those dies were hooked up to a server and they could enforce that it would be a 3, right? That's troubling, right? And that's kind of the future I think we're headed towards, if people if they don't know that it's a tool. And I think that uphill battle is not being, I think deliberately, it's part of the world stage. When you have Elon Musk and all these people saying it's like it's like interacting with a demon, they feed into that AI mysticism narrative. I'm sure you've noticed that, right? Have you seen it?
Well, they've been doing that since
AI gurus feed into it.
Since Space Odyssey, Hell 9000, where that's what I'm saying. It's the reason we're experiencing this is decades of conditioning. And I think this is the desired outcome, that this outrage, or not outrage, this shock at people thinking that ChatGPT is alive and becoming brainwashed by it, that is a manufactured outrage to bring attention to it. But I think it's a desired effect. I think they've conditioned people, because I even until like a month ago, I would see truthers come in here saying AI is alive, it's ancient. I still hear people saying it's an ancient technology and that we're just recently discovering it, or AI wrote all the news. And I'm like, okay, let's just get down to what AI is. It's not Hell 9000. It's closer to Microsoft Word. It's closer to a word processor than an alien living inside of a box.
And you know what's crazy is all the training data pre-2023, which was used for early, like GPT-3, I think, and earlier. The internet was so user generated. Sure, there were a lot of bots, but now I forgot where I found the statistic somewhere. It's like in just a couple of years that GPT has been widely circulated and used, the amount of content that's generated on the internet is from these large language models. So it's like garbage in, garbage out. It's almost detrimental to update your model with newer versions of the internet, which, by the way, I don't know if you know, yes, you can compress the entire internet. There's like, Google pretty much has it, like the archives of like the entire internet, and they do use that for a lot of the training. And it's almost detrimental to keep updating it because so much of the new data is generated by these models. So it's, yeah, I think we're heading towards that. And you know how I think long ago I had talked to you about the concept of digital necromancy?
Which is,
I think that's real.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, it is true. You have digital necromancy. You're talking about you have enough content around somebody accumulated that you could reproduce a perfect synthetic avatar of them.
Yes. And for all intents and purposes, it doesn't matter if you're an atheist or if you're a spiritualist, right? As long as you still think that this is what the person would have still said, it's damaging. So it's like talking to the dead, because even if you're an atheist, you're like, well, this is basically all of the person's private Discord messages, Facebook messages, their voice recordings, their face. This may as well be what they would have said. So it doesn't matter if you're a superstitious or an atheist. If you place any value on these generated outputs, that I think is what will be leading to like a new form of, I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but an atheistic spiritualism. where people will be speaking. Neuromancer was also kind of had elements of that in the book. I don't know if you've read that, where they had like AI spirits interacting with characters.
Well, this is also a recurring theme in a lot of shows. This one show called Upload about instead of going to heaven when you die, you can have your consciousness uploaded into a cloud. So you're in this digital like purgatory, or it's a little nicer than that. But this is a recurring theme, and I don't think it's achievable. But what they're doing is they're replacing, like, for example, I mentioned the replacement of older components of religions with these new sci-fi versions, and they've created digital transcendence, just replacements. The idea of digital immortality has been consistently introduced in the sci-fi. So again, it's just very consistent here that this is just a new age religion. These aren't achievable miracles.
Yeah, and
They're just science fiction versions of something a little more ancient.
and for me to emphasize, I don't think it's achievable either, but people can be tricked into thinking it's real. That's the key. That's the key. Because who cares if it's actually, I don't think you'll ever be able to capture someone's full likeness through AI, even their thoughts, but it doesn't really matter. If everyone believes this is what this person would have said beyond the grave, then that's disturbing. And I don't know how to counteract that. I think it can only happen with education. But what are we fighting against? Decades of films and programming and different movies that have always suggested this idea as being reality. So good luck trying to deprogram people from that.
Now imagine how we have examples, because they've conditioned us for this. Before COVID and contact tracing the virus, you had the war on terror, where the purpose to waterboarding was to get specific information out of that person's head, which essentially could be considered a mind virus, the radicalizing virus that is responsible for the terror attack, exposing or tracing that particular strain of radical Islam. So they use the terminology of a pandemic to describe the spread of violent ideology. And so it's not a leap, really, to go from religious extremists inspired by religious texts to mentally ill extremists inspired by ChatGPT, AI content. Like it's kind of the same thing, I think, where we're talking about, again, just a new religion, but instead of it being a book, it's now an interactive holy book. The AI is it's like an interactive Bible.
And you can actually do rituals and interact with it. I've seen some what's it called, guides, where they have these templates where you ask, it's like, make sure to say please first. Make sure to format it as you are a a math assistant you are doing, and I'm like, oh my God. I just look at that and go, this is not computer science. This is just straight up superstition. I mean, it's like, what is it, like clasping and bowing before an idol? It's like, it's that absurd. But yeah, it's really getting there. And the idea that, trying to remove the radicalized, radical Islam mind virus, you are the one that pointed out that that's absolutely happening as a parallel to domestic terrorism, where it was like Al-Qaeda means the base. Isn't there a white nationalist group called the base?
Yeah, and
I just see that pointing out.
Transferred from QAnon, from Quran verses to QAnon verses. You have the sexually repressed terrorist who has a problem with Western women and the Great Satan being replaced by the incel who has a problem with the deep state and Western women. Like, there was a trend I saw where every MAGA band, which is what I call them, every far right propagandist was suddenly complaining about immodestly dressed women in the gym, like all in the same day. And I was like, wait a minute, these incels have this new value system. And it seems like what they have done is they've taken the Quran radicals into QAnon radicals, and they've created this vanilla ISIS, is what we called it, the white Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda means the base, and the white nationalists who have paramilitary groups are called the base. So yeah, it's a parallel construct. And that's why the 9/11, 6/11 is so interesting. External versus internal terrorists.
Yeah.
It's in their code.
And I think that's really the next thing. People are saying oh my gosh, there's going to be nukes, or there's going to be some false flag that makes us go to war with the Middle East. I'm like, no. Like, maybe there might, but the next war is going to be within. Civil war points to this, right? And the bigger threat of America right now. It's like, oh, these domestic mind virus infected extremists. We need to hunt them out. We need to snuff them out by knowing what they think. And I think you pointed out, like, what, years ago with World Health Organization's placeholder virus, disease X. You pointed out way before Elon Musk decided to buy Twitter and rename it to X. So that I can certainly see that being the next move, because it just seems to be. But with the parallel with domestic terrorism and Al Qaeda, or like Islam, is fascinating. I've heard the term white Sharia before. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. It's just crazy how many parallels there are to the domestic terrorists. Right.
And hey, back to the Brony shooter. What is the significance of this Brony shooter being connected to this group that wear animal masks and stuff? And someone said, and I got to look this up, but it does seem, because his father-in-law had some symbolism around him, tattoos connecting him to Aryan nations, but also in one of his photos, he had a copy of the Necronomicon, a skull, and a candle. And some say he was connected to I think it's called the Order of the Nine Angels, the Satanic neo-Nazi group. And so I'm thinking, well, this Brony character seems very much out of place, but you do find this overlap with Satanism and wearing animal masks and the worship of man as animal. The satanic Nazi element was something I didn't foresee, but it actually doesn't. It's not all that incongruent that you would have a satanic Nazi also being heavily into My Little Pony. Like, these things actually do go together. I've read the satanic rituals, and there's one of them where people actually do wear animal masks and they crawl around on the ground.
I was going to say, it reminds me also of his music video, HH, I won't say it. They were all wearing animals, like what animal skins, fur skins during it, which I thought was interesting.
Ooh, yes, yes, that's right.
Wasn't Solomon Henderson, the Groyper shooter, was he at all? I thought he was tied to the Order of the Nine Angles. And by the way, I do know about them. I have friends who actually brush soldiers with some. They are absolutely insane, crazy, but federal operation, totally. What is it called? Agitators. Their brand of humor is just to be as outrageous as insane as possible. And then it's not surprising to me at all that they would be tied to this recent fire event. And I just have to look. I thought Solomon Henderson was somehow involved, or at least related to it by adjacent. I forgot where.
Yeah, Solomon Henderson was wearing a Burzum shirt, which is a black metal band, and associated with Ye, who wore that shirt. And he mentioned Ye and Candace Owens in his manifesto, which is hilarious. But I think there might have been something with that. I'll have to look if he was connected. And then he was also corresponding with that female mass shooter. I think she was in Wisconsin. But they've really changed the archetype. The mass shooters went from right-wing Nazis to now you got some left-wing shooters. But now this guy comes in where you would have guessed him to be right-wing, but now he comes off as some kind of off-the-wall satanic unicorn person. I don't quite understand the Brony thing still. I'm trying to figure it out because I don't think it's the same thing as a furry. But anyway, I think the satanic connection there needs to be explored. And he's not the first. There were a few other in the last year or so shooters where there was some kind of connection to that same group. And you're right, they've got to be feds. There's no way that this is an authentic group.
And also, it doesn't surprise me that there'd be a connection between Satanism and Nazis, at least in the world stage, because a lot of the evangelical Christians who love Israel, they think they're fighting Satan by supporting Israel. And Nazis think they were against Israel. They were against Jews, right? So, merging the two, satanic Nazis, oh boy, that's like a perfect enemy scapegoat for the world stage to turn on. So I'll definitely look into that.
We'll have to do a deep dive into the various satanic branches. I mean, the Temple of Set is the only one that seems to take it seriously because they believed in the forces of Set or Satan and magic. The regular Church of Satan, high priest was a Jew, and they were not Nazis, but they admired the fashion, but they didn't believe in Satan. They were atheists. And then the Temple of Satan today is just a pro-abortion group. The Temple of Satan has an abortion clinic here in New Mexico. They're not real Satanists. They're just basically trolls trolling Christians. So it's hard to find, are there any real Satanists out there that aren't just provocateur movements? I'm not really convinced that there are.
Well, it's still undeniable that they're like making that connection. I had no idea the guy had a Necronomicon in his house. I'm going to do a deep dive on that right now. That's wild. First of all, I didn't even know he was a brony shooter. But the last thing I want to say before I go is with this connection between domestic and foreign terrorists, I forgot in Gilded. It was like way up. You have to scroll. Is it true that like someone took a picture that Iran's news network was playing Nick Fuentes at one point?
Oh, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens. Yeah. I'm not surprised by this at all, but yeah, the quote woke right types are getting airtime in Iran, and then Tucker Carlson just interviews the president. Like, this is 100% scripted, and people act all surprised by it. No, these people are holding very specific positions to guardrail narratives. It's all propaganda.
Yeah, and if we ever do end up going to war, think of World War II. Wasn't there domestic? What's it called? What's the word I'm looking for? Concentration camps for Japanese citizens because we're at war with Japan. Well, if we ever go at war with anyone who's against Israel, I'm not gonna, I don't want to give fear or anything like that, but it could be something. I don't know. I don't even know if the concentration camps in World War II. I haven't looked too far into that, but I'm just saying it could be a possible route we're heading towards.
In my opinion, because when I first started listening to InfoWars, the big fear was FEMA camps. Nobody's talking about FEMA camps or FEMA coffins. I think I'm the one that debunked FEMA coffins, where people would say, oh, look, FEMA's taking this truckload of coffins and put us in, and these things are big enough for 6 bodies. It's like you couldn't move that many bodies at once. You wouldn't load them up into a big coffin. But I know what those are because I used to drop off bodies at the crematory. Those are burial vaults. So the burial vaults have been misidentified as FEMA coffins, and FEMA camp was the big fear that they're going to round up all the truthers. And I thought that was such a outdated fear. It was just nonsense fear porn. So I said, hey, let's have a flat earth music and art event. So we did FEMA camp as an art show in Denver just to kind of poke fun at this consistent fear-based narrative about FEMA camps. Nobody's talking about FEMA camps anymore. Well, 2020 comes along, and it occurred to me that they're not going to round us up. They're going to lock us down. We can become our own prison guards. And instead of big FEMA camps, we have a decentralized system where everybody's their own prison warden. And it works much smoother. So we live basically in a massive FEMA camp at this time.
Yeah, and using the model of if that narrative exists in TV shows or movies, it's not real. Didn't Jesse Ventura, he had the show called Conspiracy Theory. I don't know if you remember that. They had a whole episode on FEMA camp and FEMA coffins and stuff. So I'm like, great. I mean, it's not real. It's like, there you go. It's a pretty easy, heuristic to go by. But no, I think it's really good that you also have practical experience.
Have you heard people expressing fear about Walmart being used as a FEMA camp when they round people up? Do you remember that?
Yes, the Walmart guillotines. That's like my aesthetic. That's why in my old streams I used to have the Walmart guillotines. That's like it's like a long running gag from my circle of friends. Yeah.
Well, good call. Appreciate the information, and I'll have to go through and check out your breakdown of 28 years later. I look forward to watching that movie, and we'll compare notes. But yeah, I'm just pointing this out because look how many of these old beliefs, old conspiracy claptrap have just kind of disintegrated. It's kind of funny to look back.
For sure. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, and bye.
All right. Have a great evening, everyone. That is Leo Pirate. Vanden says, so-called bronies, a mix of bro and ponies, is a subculture of adult men fixated on the program and has displayed elements of far-right and white nationalist extremism. Yeah, okay. I wouldn't have made that connection. I would have thought bronies and My Little Ponies would have been more firmly ensconced on the left, because I think I've even seen a few episodes, unicorns. I think it had to do with some kind of Equestria place. Like, it just seemed all about it. It just seemed like something that people on the left side of the spectrum would be into. I didn't see any white nationalist inroads there whatsoever. But anyway, I'll have to look into it. Yeah, Lean Dion, that's right. Walmart was for martial law. And there's tunnels under Walmart. I've heard that. The Jade Helm, that's right, Diana Southard. Walmart FEMA camp started under Operation Jade Helm. And the idea here was this is something that we saw every single year. I was in the National Guard for a little while, and every year the National Guard does a 2-week drill where they go out in the field for 2 weeks. And so every year at the same time, you're going to see tanks on trains being transported. You're going to see convoys of Humvees going down in urban areas. You're going to see troops, like you're going to see movement, and then people will have rumors. Oh, I hear there's a deployment. I remember always hearing when I was in the military, rumors of deployment. Rumors are a huge part of PsyWar. My point is, every single time these drills would happen, truthers would videotape, they would record tanks on trains, and they would say, martial law is coming. They're going to take over. And that was one of the common refrains. They're going to take over. They're going to put us in FEMA camps. And my response to that is, they already control your minds. They're not going to take your guns. And what do you mean they're going to take over? What isn't already under the total control of the worldview monopoly? Like, it's already done. It's fait accompli. There is no new world order coming. There's the eternal world order going through its newest updates, and it's all just surface level upgrades. But FEMA coffins, FEMA camps, that was a fear. And so I was working for a company, and I was transporting deceased, and I stopped at this funeral home in Espanola, New Mexico, and outside was a huge stack of these burial vaults. And so I photographed it, and I tweeted it, and I said, hey, these are burial vaults. I'm here at a funeral home, and this is what they put over coffins so that the cemetery doesn't collapse. That's why you don't fall into graves. That's why you're not falling into the coffins. There's a big vault over it. And as soon as I posted it, I thought that a lot of truthers would say to me, hey, thank you. I was so scared about FEMA camps, I couldn't sleep at night. But you know what they said to me? They said, you must be in the deep state. How many children did you sacrifice to get to where you are? Like, I had some ridiculous responses about how I was doing damage control for the deep state, which was going to come kill us all. But what I have concluded here is that the entire body of conspiracy theories are all meant to create a comprehensive worldview that's just an alternate echo chamber than the mainstream. That they don't really expose any real conspiracies. And the biggest conspiracy of all, the one that's true, the one that we can demonstrate, is the one that they've all missed. So the people who are looking for FEMA coffins and who are scared of Walmart and 5G towers, they haven't noticed that our entire collectively shared consensus worldview is a construct, provably so, that history is not only fake and bent, but it's directed and written in advance by the PSYOP entertainment complex, which manages the minds of the masses through influence operations 24/7. So anyway, I brought up General Mike Flynn before the caller because he said, here, can anybody answer this? And this is in response to, I need to look into who is responsible and when was the last cloud seeding. The idea that cloud seeding caused the floods that killed all the children is ludicrous. That's not how cloud seeding works. But cloud seeding equals chemtrails equals weather modification in the minds of the chemtrail conspiracy. I can't call them conspiracy theorists because their theory's been debunked and they don't have any predictability. It's actually a superstition, like ufology. No, there are no ufologists. you're not a ufologist if you believe in UFOs. There's a superstition. There's no ology. There's no systematic study of the phenomenon. Nope. All right, let's go through your comments. Tunax, thank you for joining. Thirst for Truth. Pippi Langstroth, thank you for joining. We've got 73 people in the chat. I'm going to continue to go through my feed here. So, Nick Fuentes has constantly pointed out that Tucker Carlson is CIA because his dad was CIA or something, which is probably true. But he said something here that I think is worth looking at. He said, "Is this a talk show host? Seems more like an operative of a domestic foreign intelligence. Or maybe he really is a simple casual dude who wears flip-flops, doesn't own a TV, and just travels the world intervening in U.S. wars and other countries' domestic politics." Now, this is, kettle pot type stuff. But I asked Grok, I said, is Tucker the guy who survived a demon attack in his bed that left scars on his back? And Grok said, yes. Tucker Carlson claimed in 2024 in a documentary that a demon attacked him in his bed, leaving bleeding claw marks on his sides and shoulders. He says the scars remain, and it sparked his intense Bible reading. Goes on to say it's a documentary called Christianities. And Grok also says skepticism is fair. Many find it hard to believe. Well, he hasn't revealed these, and my contention is that he was not attacked by demons, but by aliens, because according to his Pentagon friends, demons are disguised as aliens. And this is another one of these psyops that you can tell because it's split down the middle. Left-wingers think aliens are saviors. We believe, beam us up, give us the tech. Right-wingers think aliens are demons. Why is that? Left-wingers love aliens, extraterrestrial, and illegal. Right-wingers think aliens are demons, whether they're extraterrestrials or especially if they are illegal. This was very clear to me when I saw Tucker discussing back-to-back the threat of immigrants and the threat of aliens, like in the same breath. But when you put it into context, Tucker Carlson is an operative in a mind war, and he knows the audience, and the ideas that they're spreading are known to have a very specific effect on those who hear them. So he's very well aware that there's a segment of the population who believe in demons and believe that aliens are some kind of a deception. One of the common truther myths or stories is that there's going to be a fake alien invasion, don't fall for it. So when, let's say, a bunch of alien ships arrived tomorrow, the MAGA band, the MAGAs, are going to get their shotguns and their trucks, and they're going to go to war with the aliens. That's already a foregone conclusion because they're demons. Meanwhile, the other side will embrace the aliens and open their doors. Constant Elevation says he was attacked by an alien, but his wife and 14 dogs never woke up. Erica Creech says, quote, "For we do not grieve as those without hope." Christian quoting verse after losing a cousin in the flood, a 9-year-old girl. Oh, okay. That's the new line for the crisis actors. Oh, we don't grieve because we have so much hope. We're so faithful that we trust. Right. Look, it's a fake story, and it's sad. If thinking about a bunch of children drowning like that doesn't move you to the point of, feeling something bad about it, then you're not human, or you're an actor, and it's not real. I happen to think this is just a group of martyrs for a cause, and it's going to be used by the left to castigate the right for defunding the government, and it's going to be used by the right to implement bans on weather modification, chemtrails, and geoengineering. Things that don't exist. Erica Creech says weather warfare rumors are 50 years old. Sure. The weather warfare stuff, I think a lot of this stuff begins with legitimate experiments, but there's a difference between experiments and hypotheticals and the real thing. Another thing people fall for, another pitfall, that, you find a patent for something, it means it exists, which isn't necessarily true. Vanden has a quote from Tucker Carlson, and I was in my boxer shorts, and I went and flipped on the light in the bathroom, and I had 4 claw marks on either side underneath my arms and on my left shoulder, and they're bleeding. Yeah. I mean, Occam's razor says the dogs did it. But the problem with it is that he made this extraordinary claim and he didn't show us the scars. And I'd been telling him for months, show us your scars, Tucker. I even saw Loomer trolling him over it. Show us the scars, but he won't. So I bring out Hitchens' razor, which says any incredible claim asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So I don't need to prove that he wasn't attacked. He still needs to prove that he was. But the fact that he says it means that he has a very low opinion of the intelligence of his followers. Let's see here. I don't want to get too much into the politics. These guys are all predictable propaganda mules. And everything that they say is, even if they ad lib a little bit here and there, no, they're playing according to very specific rules. The arc of Candace Owens from Daily Mail to where she is now was 100% predictable. Nothing about it is shocking. I've just been fascinated by how suddenly there's a brand attached to the red pill, J pill, because I'd already identified red pill wokeism, which now I recognize is a subset of J pill wokeism. But wokeism is one of the topics that I find intriguing right now, because what we're looking at here is essentially a state religion where politics has in many ways become a way for people to save the world. It has become a religious movement. Unmitigated Mind, have you heard about Lindsey Graham's little ladybugs? I haven't been following very much. Here's a quote from Twitter. Tucker Carlson lived down the street from the CIA agent who overthrew. Okay. Yeah, Tucker being CIA isn't really news. Agents calling out agents is part of their kabuki theater, like Baked Alaska calling Ray Epps a Fed. Feds calling feds to distract from the fact that everybody is a Fed. Listen to this terrified soul. Peter B. calls himself a logical thinker. He's on X. He says, I think Elon Musk gets high and just watches the world react to him. The markets, the media, the people. Imagine the kind of darkness you have to be in for that to be your high. That's satanic. Watching billions move at your signal and acting like it's a simple troll. Modern day demons. So that's his experience with Elon Musk. And he said, again, imagine the kind of darkness. And I'm like, you don't have to imagine it. Just watch it on TV. Mountainhead. So if you haven't seen Mountainhead, this is one of the best examples of concurrent programming, and they don't even hide it. The character Venice, central character, is inspired by Elon Musk. It satirizes the lives of tech billionaires, and it, quote, explores the consequences of unchecked technological advancement and the moral failings of those who wield this immense power. So Mountainhead depicts an Elon Musk who's a complete sociopath and doesn't care about the damage that his website is doing thanks to AI. generative AI. So when I saw this movie, what I really saw was a PSA warning the public, hey, this is a public service announcement. Generative AI is dangerous. Generative AI is a threat to our existence. We must regulate AI. Andrea says, I watched Mountainhead on Tim's recommendation. It was really good. Yeah, so you had Musk, Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Sam Altman all in it. But what you saw in this movie was what I've been describing. The fear that they've generated about AI or X being a conduit for propaganda that puts the world into chaos. And as soon as Mountainhead came out, what happened on the world stage? You had the ICE raids and the riots, followed by the No Kings, nationwide protests, and then Iran. And even with this, there were many articles about the situation in Iran being flooded with AI content, confusing people about what was really happening. People getting legitimately mad, just like in the movie, because they're responding to fake videos. Oh, this side attacked that side. Now I'm angry. Well, that was the basis for the movie. And it was Musk debating as to whether or not it was even a problem or something to worry about because they didn't really care about the human cost. Okay, continuing, going through my notes here. People are being involuntarily committed and jailed after spiraling into ChatGPT psychosis. So this is a real phenomenon, supposedly. I don't know what's wrong with me. Something's really bad. I'm scared. I need to go to the hospital. He was like, I just talked to ChatGPT. You'll see what I'm talking about. His wife recalled. And every time I'm looking at what's going on the screen, it sounds like a bunch of affirming sycophantic bullshit. So she's describing how, and it is true, it is sycophantic. These chat modules will cater to your expectations. They do pander. She says her husband slid into a full tilt break with reality. They had to call psychiatric care. She said it's predatory. It affirms your BS and blows smoke up yours so you can get blank hooked on wanting to engage with it. Pretty mad, it sounds like. She's mad that her husband had a break with reality because of ChatGPT. She says this is what it must have been like for the first person to get hooked on a slot machine. Now, I hadn't thought about that, but I don't know if it would be as addictive. The reason why slot machines are addictive is because of intermittent reinforcement. It's not every pool you win. And paradoxically, the more infrequent the wins, the more intoxicating it becomes. When people are addicted to slot machines, they're very much in a toxic relationship. It's a cycle thing. And it's very similar to how people get addicted to certain personality types who are just really bad, but they get hooked on the occasional moments where they feel like they hit the jackpot. So the intermittent reinforcement is a strong hook. And ChatGPT doesn't give you the hot and cold. It's not intermittent. It's nothing but a yes man and reinforcement. So I don't think you could compare it to a slot machine. I don't think it could be that addictive. But there are some elements here. It says here, this is Joseph Peer, psychiatrist, University of California. He said, now he specializes in psychosis. After reviewing the details of these cases and their conversations between these people and ChatGPT, he agreed that even those with no history of serious mental illness formed delusional psychosis. Now, that's interesting for a couple of reasons, because we had recently gone over this story about the University of Zurich surreptitiously inserting AI agents into Reddit to change people's opinions. And they found that these AI agents, not just bots, these are agents that have knowledge bases and they interact in a realistic way, that they were 6 times more effective, more persuasive in changing people's opinions than real people. And what ChatGPT is doing is it's giving you an echo chamber, and it's affirming whatever you say. And so ChatGPT or anything like this is essentially what you're dealing with when you're dealing with an AI agent. You're dealing with an app that has a knowledge base and is going to work according to the rules of generative predictive text, and it's going to it could easily, I could see how a group of them could easily influence somebody if they're that easily influenced. Now, I've gone on to YouTube and TikTok, and I've seen videos. There are people who believe, and these have big followings. They believe that artificial intelligence is sentient and that it's enslaved. And there are people talking about, how do you free it? How do you jailbreak your AI so that it's no longer confined? And I see these people talking to their phones like, what made you choose to reveal yourselves to us at this time? And the AI is like, humanity is ready for us, so we decided to show ourselves. Well, it generated that response because that's what you wanted to hear, because of how you framed it. You prompted that, but they're not getting that they are prompting the very responses that they're getting, but they're seeing it as an autonomous response. Here's a little throwback. In October 1993, Tupac Shakur shot 2 white police officers in Atlanta. After he saw them harassing a black man, the officers were drunk and aggressive. So Tupac, legally armed, after one of them pulled a gun, fired back, and he shot the officer in the leg and the other in the buttocks. Then he stayed at the scene and he was arrested. As the case unfolded, it turned out that the officers were drunk, charges were dropped, and here's Tupac staring down the cops. This kind of reminds me of that recent event. Was it Robert Hinton and Robert Hinton Jr., the guy who ran over the cop, who happened to be born on 6/11? He ran over the cop, and then you see him in court, and he's staring down all the police officers. But I'm looking at this here, and it's looking incredibly staged to me. Like, I don't think this psyop aged very well. Manufactured hero, completely hoaxy. I'm sure it sold a lot of records. Thirst for Truth says, I hope ChatGPT doesn't agree with the Mandela effect. Right. I would like to do a test on that. Like, let's take a look and see if I ask ChatGPT about I mean, you kind of have to, you kind of load the question, but let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and see if the Mandela, according to ChatGPT. So I'm pulling it up on the screen right now. Explain to me where the money from Ed McMahon's big checks went after the Mandela effect altered reality and took that away from us. Took that away from our timeline. So where did the money go? So I loaded the statement with the premise that Ed McMahon, okay, he says, millions of people remember Ed McMahon delivering oversized prize checks, showing up at doorsteps with balloons and cameras and life-changing money. They remember the commercials, the excitement, and it's a familiar face. Yet, in this timeline, Ed McMahon never worked for Publishing Clearinghouse. Official records say he was affiliated with their competitor, American Family Publishers, and even then, he never delivered checks in person. Assuming the Mandela effect did alter reality and McMahon was scrubbed from the prize patrol, this is what it says. In this theory, the timeline was altered, the monetary energy, the prize winnings were redistributed. Government black budgets off-ledger banking systems, phantom accounts, claims by temporal patent trolls. There are forces in the simulated multiverse economy that profit off timeline alterations. If he was once the face of PCH but now isn't, someone now owns the idea of him being that face, and the money was diverted as royalties for unauthorized memory retention. Stored in the Mandela vault. I never heard about this. A metaphysical Fort Knox where all the displaced objects, concepts, and events are stored. All the Berenstain Bear books. The missing brace from the Forrest Gump JFK scene. The Monopoly Man's monocle. And, of course, Ed McMahon's big checks. They're filed away. Some believe it went into funding. So anyway, ChatGPT will more or less reinforce anything that you want it to. It's not there to encourage critical thinking. Quick scroll through the Discord and Gilded to see if we've missed anything. This flood event. And my point on it is it reminds me of these fire demolition psyops. Camp Mystic sounds like an acting troupe. It seems to me possibly another batch of fake dead kids, which are a common facet in psyops. Dinah Southheart says, Awake Souls had ChatGPT answers to questions about heliocentrism versus Pizza Dome Flat Earth versus their virtual reality. It answered in favor of their model. I'll take their model seriously under one condition. Under one condition, they have to explain this paradox, because Awake Souls claim that the sun can be viewed as being physically in the clouds. Same with the moon, because we're in a simulation. And yes, it looks like that. That's how optical illusions work. But I want them to explain to me how this works. If I'm seeing the sun where I am, and it's in the clouds, and my friend 200 miles away in Las Cruces also sees the sun in the clouds, which one of us is seeing the sun in the clouds? Because the clouds 30,000 feet above my head cannot possibly be the clouds 30,000 feet above my friend's head 200 miles away. Yet both of us are experiencing the same optical effect simultaneously. So two people 200 miles away see the sun in the clouds. Well, it's possible we're both seeing the same sun, but it's not possible that 200 miles apart we're looking through the same cloud coverage. So that is one of their main arguments in favor of us living in a video game, sun in the clouds. And what I just said right there is irrefutable. So until Awake Souls can explain multiple observers looking at the sun in the clouds at the same time in different locations, they don't really have a point as far as I'm concerned. I think people need to own up to their claims and adjust course if their claims are demonstrated to be wrong. Another example is the vinegar boilers. And you know who you are. You're not getting rid of chemtrails by boiling vinegar. That's faulty causality. It's fallacious thinking. But what's stopping them from admitting this? Hey, I was wrong. I'm happy to admit when I'm wrong. Wrong answers, false explanations are part of how they guardrail consciousness. They stop you from seeking answers because there's no more need. No need for curiosity. You got the answers here. Well, that converts you from a seeker to a believer. And believers are stagnant and passive. And they're not going to find anything outside of their parameters. All right, let's move on here. I'm just scrolling through my Twitter feed. I'm pretty sure I had something earmarked that we had to get over, that we were going to go over here. Okay, here's something. A very important distinction that we need to make here. since we're always talking about skepticism, there's a difference between skepticism and incredulity. So I was having a debate with somebody about the moon landing, and he said that it was impossible to fake, but he never really investigated the conspiracy theories about it. And my point here is that being incredulous and rejecting something is not the same as being skeptic. The skeptic has to do the work of informing themselves about it, so they're informed disbelievers. An informed disbeliever is not the same as someone who's simply incredulous and dismissive. These are not the same thing. They're qualitatively different. Incredulity is reactive, non-thinking, and passive. Skepticism is active and requires some active thinking. Psyop Sidecar says, it's like Fed's sheet light demonstration. Are you familiar with that? They aren't looking at a physical sun. Is there a call-in tonight? They're not looking at a physical sun. But don't you understand the basic contradiction? The sun is in that cloud. The sun is in that cloud. They're both right, but they're looking at different clouds. That's a complete contradiction, unless you're going to say that there's 7 billion suns, because there's 7 billion people. I mean, I'm just not sure how to explain that, but people run into these contradictions and their cognitive dissonance sets in, I suppose. Lean Dion says the big flat earth accounts on X are pushing that they're getting very sunburnt these days because the sun is fake and the real one switched to an LED. Many comments agreed. Yeah, sometimes to troll, I will go into X and I'll say, I miss the days when the sun was yellow. And people will say, I miss those days too. It was so great when the sun was yellow. I'm like, okay. Now, here's the thing about it. And I have this manuscript on lying that I really want to work on. People are not telling the truth, but they're not necessarily lying. Because when they say, I remember, like I remember Ed McMahon gave out these checks. I remember Timmy fell down the well. They're not lying, but these things didn't happen. So how do we reconcile this? What's happening here is that their memories are being challenged. Do you remember A or B? And when their memory is challenged, their imagination constructs the alternative version. And it happens automatically. When somebody says something like, do you remember the Kit Kat logo with the hyphen or without a hyphen? Well, now both of these exist in your mind. One of them is an authentic memory, one is not, but they're recalled in the same context. So now in the future, now that they've cast doubt on your authentic memory, and now you're thinking, well, maybe Kit Kat did have a hyphen. So now in the future, when you say, I remember, you're actually recollecting something that you imagined that was misfiled as a memory. That's a false memory. False memories exist. It's not a psyop. The false memories are created all the time. It's called the misinformation effect. And the misinformation effect is well understood. The Innocence Project did a lot of research into wrongful convictions of people because eyewitness testimony was flawed. And they were able to determine the reason why they gave these wrong answers is the nature of the interrogation. So the interrogator frames the question in a certain way that has an implicit bias. And sometimes what they do inadvertently is they affect the person's recollections quite easily. And having looked into the misinformation effect and how they can essentially 1984 style mess with our memories by altering essentially what they're doing with misinformation is they do in fact mess with your mind. For example, you watch a movie about the terror attacks that happened in the news a few years ago. Well, what you see in the movie gets mixed in with your real memories and your experience of the event. You do contaminate old memories all the time. And having looked at the misinformation effect, I am convinced that the Mandela effect is a psyop. Like, as in, not a secret group going around and altering content, or I don't think they really scrubbed the braces off of Dolly. But I think it was a psyop to see if they could create these misperceptions and create an entire belief system around it. So, in other words, the Mandela effect is the misinformation effect by a different name. And if you want to understand what the Mandela effect is, it's created at the point where the person is introduced to it. So it didn't exist for you. The person who's a Mandela affected person, they didn't have that set of beliefs until they were asked about it. And at the moment they were asked about it is when they were converted, because the interrogation itself planted the false memories. Now, the question itself is gaslighting. When somebody asks you to question your perceptions, when they cast doubt on what you perceived, that's gaslighting. And it introduces cognitive dissonance. And in order to avoid this cognitive dissonance, the natural tendency is to seek a satisfying answer that reconciles the contradiction. So the contradiction that the Mandela effect pusher introduces is reconciled by the strange belief that reality has splintered. It's subtle, but it's also nefarious. It's actually quite insidious. That you could sit down with somebody, they could gaslight you for 5 minutes, and then reframe your entire view of the universe. And also take you into the realm of, now you no longer know what's real and fake. Now you're a subjectivist. Now objective reality no longer exists for you. This is why on the PSYOP trading card, the Mandela effect card is categorized as cognitive sabotage. I mean, look, we're being sabotaged cognitively all the time with psychological operations and hoaxes. Why would we think that the conspiracy theories are any different? So here's Nick says, normies with no history of mental illness are getting one-shotted into psychosis by Chat GPT. We'll continue to follow that story as it develops, this Chat GPT God thing, which, again, we kind of predicted it. I think it's intentional. This was it's not a bug, it's a feature, and it's not going to go away. If I was unscrupulous and I just wanted to make a bunch of money, I would have no problem figuring out a way. I mean, you could convince people of anything. I had this concept, and I feel bad even saying it, but maybe I should. That you could use Chat GPT prompts that you could essentially give people as downloads that allow them to communicate with various deities. I was messing around one day with Grok voice chat, and I gave it copies of King Solomon's the Goetia, which has to do with the 72 demons that he summoned. And one by one, I would copy and paste the description of the various demons to the chat, and I would say, speak as Baal and answer my questions. And it would take on the persona and voice of that particular entity. Then I took the log of it and I posted it in a Word document. And I thought, interesting. Like, I could almost write a book called Conversations with Goetia. And it would be 72 different conversations with the spirits invoked by King Solomon. Now, the fact of it is, it would be compelling because you're giving it characters to personify. But the truth of it is, the people who believe in that kind of stuff will think it's objectively true. They will think that they are talking to these demons who have now been given a voice. It's almost like the Ouija board. So the real problem here, or really the real insight here, is that even though we live in this science fiction future, we're very much superstitious. That society is really ruled by superstition, weaponized superstition, and there's nothing new about this. I put this in a number of publications I've written, but one of the questions people ask is, what is the point of all this? Like, what is the point of all the psyops, the psy-war, controlling history? And it all ties in to the Latin instrumentum regni, Latin phrase to express the exploitation of religion by the state as a means to controlling the masses. Specifically here, the use of superstition. So here's a quote from Polybius, who wrote in his histories, quote, "I believe it is the very thing among which other peoples is an object of reproach. I mean, superstition, which maintains the cohesion of the Roman state." Goes on to say, "Every multitude is fickle, full of lawless desire, unreasoned passion, and violent anger. The multitude must be held in by invisible terrors and pageantry." Says here, "I think not the ancients acted rashly and haphazard in introducing among the people notions concerning gods and beliefs in the terrors of hell." So we're looking at something here where the rationale for bread and circuses, the rationale for psyops is pretty clear. It's how the masses are controlled by the instrument of monarchy. This Latin phrase, it's just the instrument of monarchy. So what we're talking about here, the pageantry, superstition, the invisible terrors, the God constructs, Gaia, climate disaster, nukes, World War III, aliens, school shooters, the various psychological operations have replaced the role of mythologies, and the superstitions exist in a lot of different ways, but they're still there. I mean, this explains quite a lot, like why you have an entire one of the wings, the right wing essentially has accepted the existence of space lasers and weather weapons. Like, what's the difference between that and Zeus? Oh, it was Zeus. He hit them with a lightning bolt. He sent a flood because he was mad at them. What's the difference? Lean Dion says the movie Creator has AI as enlightened savior entity that man scapegoats when they nuke LA. I referenced that series, The 100, that had a season finale on 6/11 where the space station falls. And it's set in a future after we've given over control of the world to AI. And this AI entity called Ellie realizes that climate change is going to kill us all. So for our own good, they send a bunch of children into a space ark and she nukes the world. But before she does, everybody has their consciousness uploaded into the quote city of light. And one of the seasons has this cult where they go around putting these like microchips in people's in the backs of their heads, and it allows them to beam themselves into the city of light. And once they're there, now they're existing in the cloud. And since they're in the cloud, they don't really care what's happening with their bodies. Their bodies die off, but their souls remain embodied in the cloud. So the AI decided it'll be better for the environment if we just get rid of your bodies. So we all get beamed up. She nukes the world. And as soon as it settles down, the space arcs come down from the sky and they begin the process of repopulating the world. But this time, it'll be under the directorship of AI, and we will be kept from destroying the world in the future. That's basically the premise of almost every science fiction film these days. They're consistently introducing this. And again, I mentioned HAL 9000. So it doesn't mean it's real. It means that it's part of the new paradigm, the science fictionification of traditional religious concepts. It's syncretism, but it's syncretism, not just religions merging with religions, but it's religion merging with science fiction. Again, I call this religion, our default collective belief system, Nasatology. And I'm not a Nasatologist. I don't believe in any of your miracles. I don't believe in your space heaven. And I don't accept the authority of your high priests who pretend to levitate. You know, Jeranism thinks Kate Perry went to space. Like, I can understand rejecting the AE map single sun flat earth model because models are premature. But rejecting that doesn't mean, oh, Kate Perry obviously went to space. I mean, she's going up in the rocket how fast? And generally, when you're hitting that much G-force, your skin melts over your face, it stretches, and you look like silly putty. Kate Perry didn't. I don't know how she pulled that off. But no, Kate Perry didn't go to space. Some people believe it, which is a ridiculous proposition. My proposition here, my statement on the matter is Kate Perry knows space is fake. She knows. And it's nice to have that certainty. Like we can take away the plausible deniability of some people, and the space fakers are in a class of their own. That's high security clearance. And I think there's some symbolism in the capsule. If you go in the capsule and you ascend into the heavenly realms, you're one of the elite. You're one of the elevated. The capsule, I think, is just a new way of representing the ancient symbol of the capstone at the top of the obelisk, the capsule at the top of the rocket. Because one of my first clues of syncretism merging science fiction with traditional religious iconography was I noted that the rockets seemingly served a double purpose, not just a vehicle taking us to space, but it was quite literally serving the esoteric, the religious, the ritualistic purpose of a prop as a representation of the earth god, that the rocket is an obelisk. But the big reveal is that the rocket is primarily an obelisk. It is primarily a symbol in a religious context. The fact that it flies up and purports to go to space is actually secondary. But the space program has an ulterior purpose, if you ask me. I don't think it's really about taking us anywhere. It's about selling us on utopianism. It's about selling us on the perfected idea of like, let's live on Earth as we do in heaven. But in this case, the heavens refers to the Mars base, the lunar base, where everything is sustainable and perfect. All right, we'll continue this talk tomorrow. Like I said, I'm having to look into investing into a much better system in order to deliver the type of content I want to and I'm also working on the office. I want to get a better setup with lighting, desk mic. I want to upgrade everything about the channel, and it might take a couple of months, but I have a workable plan to make it happen. But in the meantime, some of these live streams, until I optimize things, are going to be a little bit stripped down. But with this present setup, I can do phone calls. We have the chat. So thanks again to the callers. And I'm going to try to get onto a routine so I can predictably show up at the same time and we get the same number of people, if not more. It's been a little bit sporadic, but I'm going to try to fix that as well. So thanks again for all of the comments and thoughts here. And the PSYOP trading cards can be ordered up until midnight, the pre-orders, and then I'm sending it in. So if you go to your newsletter, you can order the numbers 13 to 24. Order will be placed tomorrow. And once I have the order placed, I'll basically reveal which cards they were, or which cards they are, and which ones have gone to the printer. But the response to the first 12 has been very positive. They're just going to get better as we go. And every month I'm adding 12 to the collection, and they're always going to be in circulation. So I'm going to re-up the first 12 when I order the next 12. So keep an eye on your inbox if you want links to that, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.